All right, so today I'm going to be showing you what we're going to be doing for an engine and go ahead and get started on putting it together. Goal for today is going to be to go ahead and get the cylinders installed, the heads and the lifters and our push rod tubes, get all that going. Now that we're getting ready to start putting this motor together, I guess we should talk about what our plans are for it and show you what exactly it is we're putting on this bike. Because a regular 883, which is what this started out as, is not going to cut it. We're going to have to bump up the displacement a bit and do a couple of trick little things. So I'll show you now what we got so far and go from there. So here we go. Here's everything we're working with. All right. So we're going to be doing a Hammer 1275 kit with the flat top pistons. All right, so we're doing that with the highlighted fins. I'm doing with the Impact 560 cam set, a Dynatec Ignition, doing the pushrod tube retainers, the new ones. Then I've got the locking gear so that I can change out the oil pump drive gear, as well as, well, it's not needed for that, but also change over to the steel timing cup. And then I have my jets because I actually am going to be keeping the CV carburetor, which came stock on these Sportsters. Then we've got our gasket kit, obviously. And finally, my favorite piece, just because of how hard it is to find, is these. These are brand new old stock Screaming Eagle heads. Now, is this the best option for this bike? No. If you wanted to make like a ton of power, you'd go and send your heads off to someone like Hammer and have them actually port and polish your heads correctly and build them perfectly for what you're going for. Now, for my application, this is good. I'm only looking to make 100. I talked to Hammer Dan and everything. He said that's the way to go. So now it is kind of neat because if you look at this compared to like a regular head, it is pretty nicely machined in there, right? It's not too bad. It's a little wider. The bathtub looks a lot nicer in there. You know, you can see they did some machine work on there. You can see the valves, they're pretty decently sized, right? And then there we go, we got our exhaust side. Also, you can see it's ported. You can see a little bit of the powder coatings left over in there, but that's fine. You know, it's pretty cool though. I found those new old stock. I actually got those through my local dealership, Ukes Harley-Davidson, up here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. They helped me out a lot with finding them. No dealer in the country had them, anything like that. They were able to track down a pair. I'm pretty sure these might be the last pair. I think there was one pair left in Texas whenever I got mine. So if you want a set, act fast because they're probably non-existent. I know right now you can no longer order them directly through Harley. All right, so that all being said, this is not the end of what's going to happen with this bike and the motor, right? There's a couple other things I want to do later on. I'll talk about those later. It's going to involve opening up the primary, doing some work in there, and opening up the trans and doing some trans work. So that's something I've never done before, and I'm excited to learn how to do it on this build. So anyways, that's what we're working with so far. And we'll go ahead and get started installing this up here pretty soon. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get our cylinder base gaskets on. Let's go ahead and get that dropped on in place. All right. I like to do the rear cylinder first just because it's already limited with this on this side, the starter. So if you do the front cylinder first and then you work on the rear, you just don't really have a lot of room to get around. So then we're going to take our rear cylinder, or actually before we take our rear cylinder, I'm going to take my oil, go ahead, get it all nice and lubed up in there, right? There we go. Go ahead and get my circlips ready. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back down. So this is so if while I'm doing the install, the circlip pops out of the way, I can, and falls in here, it won't fall into the case, so it'll fall into this little guy. All right. So I went with the pre-assembly setup here from the guys over at Hammer. And I recommend it. It's just nice. They were already, you know, rings were already gapped and everything. They even put a circlip on one side already, so you only have to do one circlip on the other. So it kind of makes it nice and easier. So once again, go ahead, get you some lube in there just to get it started. And I'm just using the same lube that I'll be running in the bike. So now we're going to go ahead and take that cylinder. Whoop. Go ahead and get it started in place, right where I want it. All right. Now we're going to take that pin. Now we're going to slowly work it in there. You shouldn't need to force it. There we go. And once that's all the way in, I've got my safety glasses on, because sometimes when you go to put these pins in, they like to pop out and go straight for your face. So, got my needle nose pliers here. And that is exactly why we have this down here. So that way if it does fall like that and it falls down here, we don't got to worry about it. So you kind of work it in there a little bit. And there you go. There we go, it's clipped in. So now that's clipped in, let's go ahead and verify it's in there all the way, right? Because the last thing you want is that clip to decide it's not fully seated and work its way out, all right? So yep, looks like it's fully seated in there. And then we'll go ahead and pull this guy out of the way. And slide the piston up into the cylinder. All right. There we go. Nice and in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. All right, so now you can see we went ahead and we got both of our cylinders installed. So now we're gonna go ahead and check these MLS gaskets out. So what we're looking at here is these gaskets have these little rivets that hold it all together. So we're just gonna make sure that they're not in a place where they're gonna get pinched whenever we tighten down these heads. All right, so we go ahead and check. All right. Everything looks good. Doesn't look like there's anywhere they're gonna hit on the cylinder itself. So now let's go ahead and check the head. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and do the same with the head. We're gonna look. And it looks like back here is okay. It's a little close, but I think we'll be all right. But if we look up here at the front, it's definitely touching right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim that. We're still gonna have this one back here holding it together, but I'm gonna go ahead and trim that front one because this is the same level as the mounting surface, so I don't wanna worry about it possibly causing some weird tension up there. So let's see if we can just cut it with some regular old wire cutters. Nope, doesn't look like that's gonna work. So it looks like we're gonna have to bust out our Dremel. All right, so now we got all this. Safety first. We got our safety goggles on. Double check which one it is we're cutting. Yep, we're gonna be cutting this end off. All right. I'm gonna see if I possibly can just cut the rivet itself out. See, we didn't catch the gasket material, but do we want to keep risking it like that? Oh, there we go. Looks like we're able to just pop the rivet straight on out now. There we go. Rivet's no longer there, so that kind of gets rid of the problem. Right? So now, go ahead, get it all lined up, boom. No more rivet in the way. And that rivet back there is no issue at all. So that's what I'm gonna do to both of these. That should work. And then the only other thing we have to do, since this head is complete already, to prep it for install is to install these two O-rings right here. So take our O-rings here. Get them all covered in oil there. There we go. All ready. Pop it in place. Pop it in place. Now we're going to go ahead and seat it. Use this little socket to kind of push it in place. All right. There we go. You want to make sure you're getting it past the lip, because there is a lip in there that it needs to sit in. All right. So now we'll go ahead and flip it over. Yep, seated in there all the way. All right, cool, we're good. So next step we're gonna do is pull the lifters out of the crankcase now and install our new ones. So to go ahead and get these lifters pulled out, first thing we're going to have to do is loosen up these bolts here that hold the lifters in place. So go ahead and get those out of the way. All right, now that we got those out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and remove our old lifters. So I'm gonna use a magnet to get these guys out. All right, it's our old lifter. Go ahead and get them all out. All right, there we go. Got all our lifters out. All right, the next thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna clean these guys off, get all that gunk off of them. All right, now our next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and prep our new lifters. I'm gonna put down a shop rag. We got our new lifters here. Go ahead and pull them out. Whoop. Place them here. All right, so we got all our lifters here. So I don't know if they pre-fill these or not. So we're gonna go ahead and just pump them with our oil can. You can see it, it's pulling up there. So it looks like they might come pre-filled. Oh, no. There we go. Oh, yeah, they might come pre-filled. Either way, we're pumping them up just to be sure. So another thing you could do is you could put these in a jar and pressurize that jar with a vacuum pump or like a brake bleeder. Or another thing people like to do is leave their lifters in a thing of oil overnight That's another good method. But I just like to hand bleed them. So now that we got our lifters all bled out and everything, we can go ahead and put them in there. All right, so now we got our lifters all bled. So they're all primed and all that stuff. Right, like nothing else. Yeah, nothing else comes out. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pop them in. So whenever you're putting your lifters in, flat side is perpendicular to the case, right? The hole, I'm gonna put the hole towards the pistons. Whenever I took these out, the holes were actually facing out, but it doesn't seem to matter because it's all gonna get pressurized anyways, evenly. So that's kind of the advantage of these hydraulic pressure lifting these lifters. And hole facing in is the way Hammer Dan does it. So if it's good enough for Hammer Dan, it's definitely good enough for me. So now we're going to go ahead and pop these guys in here. All right, start threading them in. I'm just trying to get them all started first, just to make sure we don't have any issues. Because these are our anti-rotation pins. These are what is going to prevent your lifter from rotating, because you don't want that. All right. So it looks like that lifter does not, that anti-rotation pin is not wanting to go in. So that means that lifter is probably not seated correctly. So let's see. I'm gonna have to stick something in there. I got Q-tips. I'm gonna try a Q-tip. Actually, here, we're gonna try this Allen key. There we go. That helps me get it to where I need it to be. There we go. So now that I got those all, now that I know they all go in, I'm gonna pull them back out, put some Loctite on them, and then torque them to spec, which is 60 inch-pounds. Remember, inch-pounds. See, it's going to be almost nothing. We'll go ahead and do the rest. there we go. Now we got our lifters installed. All right, so now let's go ahead and start installing our heads. All right, so we're using MLS gaskets. All right, as you can see, this is going to be a different torque spec than what you would normally torque a standard Harley gasket that you'll see on here. All right, so they have a specific procedure to follow, so we'll do that. We already cleaned up our surfaces real nice. Gasket surfaces, we're all good. I'm going to have to kind of like hold that in place a bit while we get the head on. All right. So we got our head here. These are your dowel alignment pinholes. We're going to go ahead. This is going to be a real challenge to get this on here. All right. I wonder if it might be easier to flip this thing up. No, no different. All right, so here's how I think we're gonna do it. I'm gonna hold it like that while I work the head onto it. Definitely would recommend a second person for this part. There we go. All right, so we got that head on there. So now we'll go ahead and drop our bolts. We're gonna do 2 short bolts in the front, and then your 2 longer bolts back here on top. All right. One thing to note here is the service manual does actually call for a tiny droplet of oil on each stud. So I'm just going to put them on this little nut here and work it down. It calls for a very small amount. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go follow our torquing specs, right? We've gone ahead and finger tightened everything. It says we're going to go in sequence 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to tighten to 9 foot-pounds, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 14, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 22, and then finally, and then 35 foot-pounds, and then finally 42 foot-pounds. All right, so go ahead and do that. All right, so now we'll go to 14. After 14, we go to 22. All right, next we go to 35. All right, and then the final is going to be to 42. All right, there we go. Torque's down. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get our pushrod tubes installed. All right, so, oh yeah, it's going to fit up in there, no problem. Cool. All right, so we got the hammer pushrod tube bases that we're going to be installing. These are a lot better than those OEM ones that are two-piece. This is all one piece, holds it all together better. So let's go ahead and see about getting that all up in there. There we go. It's pretty easy. I thought that was going to be a lot harder. And then I'll show you what I'm doing right here. As you can see right here, we're just slowly pushing that down until it's nice and flat. Then we're taking our hardware, just putting a little bit of blue Loctite on it. I'm gonna work it in there. There is a torque spec for this, but I do not have a torque wrench that will fit in there. So I'm going to use my arm torque wrench. All right. So I'm looking at, this is all nice and flat on all sides. I don't see any daylight. All right, and now we're going to double check up top at the rocker boxes. They're not bolted in. I just put them in there just for looks for now. We're going to look and see. Yep, looks like they're seated very well. So, got everything all seated. We're good to go. Now we'll do our little torque spec, yeah, that's about good. Let's do the same here. Yep, that's about good. We're not going to over tighten them. It's very easy to strip these out. There's not a lot of thread there, and there's not a lot of other material to work with if you do strip it out and have to re-tap it. So we're putting a Healy coil. So we're just going to go ahead and do that and let that blue Loctite do its job. All right, so there we go. Got it all taken care of, got it all installed. So those rocker boxes are just sitting up top right now just to prevent any stuff from falling in or anything, so I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, got our lifters done, push rod tubes, new cylinders, new heads. So until next time, have a good one.